gentlemen, and tarnished of all ages, how do you feel about slinging rings of holy energy at your enemy non-stop until they drop to the floor? Dead. Sounds a bit unholy if you ask me, but today we are all about becoming an absolute tank of faith using the Halo Scythe weapon semi-unique weapon skill Miquellas Ring of Light. This weapon skill, when used, fires off a ring of light in front of you that homes in on your target, but the thing that makes it work for this is that you can do a literally infinite number of repeated inputs to just fire off ring after ring after ring, doing tons and tons of damage with only 3 limiting factors. Firstly, FP, but it only costs 11 FP with each press, so you can make that last for quite a while. Secondly, stamina, as using the skill costs stamina. And thirdly, being hit by the enemy. If you are hit hard enough to break your poise even a little, your chain of discs will stop firing forwards. So what if we did everything possible to prevent that last hurdle and just let the holy light fly for as long as our stamina and FP allow? Well, that's what we're here to do today with the Halo Scythe tank build. And it's worth noting as well that while there is a sacred ring of light skill, an Ash of War that is separate that you can put on any scythe and technically build the scythe itself to be better, that Ash of War, while costing 3 less per cast than this one, also does like 15 to 20% less damage, so it's really just not worth using if your main focus is the Ash of War itself. Alright then, first thing of note, this build uses super heavy armor and also uses the Ironjar Aromatic. This item boosts your poise by a ridiculous amount. Said amount doesn't show up on your status screen, but combined with the base poise of our armor, it makes it so you can just ignore pretty much every attack most enemies will throw out, while it also reduces the damage you take. This combo is what lets us just sling out these holy discs as much as we please, and while an individual disc doesn't do crazy damage, you aren't going to one-shot a boss with this thing or anything, the repeated unstoppable onslaught of discs is extremely hard for any enemy to deal with, as you can see. To make this even better, this build was actually buffed both in patch 1.07 and the more recent patch 1.08. Specifically, what happened in patch 1.07 is that damage detection was added to the weapon swing part of the Ash of War, and given that you can hit with both parts at the same time, this means any enemy within melee range of you gets hit by both, which adds a fair bit of damage. On top of that, the fact that Scythe itself has a bit of bleed status on it, so with enough hits at close enough range, you also get a bleed proc as a bit of a bonus. In 1.08, there was a general buff across the board to the movesets of Reapers, of which this weapon is one of, increasing the speed of some attacks and reducing the recovery time of attacks too. This part doesn't affect us a massive amount, as the weapon swings themselves with this build are pretty anticlimactic and absolutely not the point of it at all. But a buff is a buff, so it's hard to look a gift scythe in the mouth.
It's an idiom.
Before we get into the nitty-gritty of it all then, how does this function in PvP? Well, the answer is it sort of varies. It is extremely powerful against the right enemies, and it also has a couple of glaring weaknesses. If your enemy spends their entire time dodging, they can avoid every ring, but more often than not, they will slip up. However, the main point of this build is hitting many rings, not just one, and so it can turn into a bit of a long, drawn-out slog of a fight. That said, the second that anyone loses their patience even slightly against you, they're just sort of screwed. 2 to 3 rings is enough to kill most any player, and you can get that off in the time of anyone else doing a single Ash of War. And so the moment that your enemy decides to go on the offensive against you, unless they can one-shot you through Ironjar, which is possible, but most builds just can't, they are already dead. So with all that said, what are the little bits and pieces that come together to make this build a reality then? Well, first up is of course the weapon itself, which is a random drop chance from the scythe-wielding Cleanrot Knights in the Aeonia Swamp in Caelid. Then we need a seal to do our casting with. Anyone that has 0 weight to do it will do, as we are using any offensive incantations in the build itself, though you may choose to add some when you recreate the build, so keep in mind the bonuses of each seal. Personally, I'm using the Erdtree seal. After that, we have our armor set, which today is the full Bullgoat armor for maximum defense and poise, and you get this from doing the assassination quest for patches in Volcano Manor. After that, we move on to talismans, and of course we have the classic Shard of Alexander talisman, as this build revolves around a weapon skill, and the talisman boosts skill damage by 15% across the board. To get this, if you don't already have it, you must speak to Alexander in 3 locations. First, in the desert, where you first defeat General Radon, then southwest of the Seathwater Terminus site of Grace on Mount Gelmir in a magma pool, and then finally you can find him near the Dragon Temple Lift site of Grace in Farum Azula for one last meeting. After that, we have the Erdtree +2 talisman for a significant boost to HP, stamina, and equip load, and you can find this once Lane Dell has become the City of Ash by going backwards from the mountaintop of the Giants back up the lift to go to this corner of the open area, where you'll find the talisman waiting for you. After that, we have the Dragon Crest Great Shield talisman, which significantly boosts your physical damage negation. To get this one, first go to the Drain drainage channel, Site of Grace in the Halig Tree region, then head out to the east and follow the branches up to the archways, back to some more branches, and then even some more archways to eventually reach the roof of a building. On the roof there is a hole, and if you drop through the hole you'll land on some wooden beams. From here you can see on your left that there is a chest on a balcony, and within that chest is a talisman you seek. Then finally we have the Sacred Scorpion Charm Talisman, which boosts your holy damage by 12% at the cost of some damage negation. And while normally I wouldn't recommend using this in PvP, even if you do, you will only reduce your physical damage negation to about 42% before even counting the Ironjar. So even using this, you are still pretty damn tanky, though feel free to switch it out if you please. To get this one, you must defeat the NPC Invader located at the Smoldering Church in Caelid. As for our Wondrous Flask of Physic, I recommend the Holy Shrouding Cracked tier for a 20% holy damage boost, which is of course our main source of damage. And to get this one, you have to defeat the boss located at the Minor Erdtree in northeast Liurnia up in the hills. Secondarily, I'd recommend the Thorny Cracked tier. This increases your attack power with successive weapon hits, which actually affects this build specifically when your enemy enters melee range. If you hit with the weapon hit part of the Ash of War 3 times in a row or more, you'll notice your damage start to spike up pretty significantly, which is what makes this worth using when the whole build is focused around letting us spam the Ash of War at any range for maximum effect. To get this, you'll need to defeat the boss located at the Minor Erdtree in the Consecrated Snowfields region. Now moving on to incantations, first up is Golden Vow, which gives you a 15% buff to all damage and 10% buff to damage negation for 80 seconds after casting, and this is found in the Corpse Stench Shack on the eastern side of Mount Gelmir. Then we have Flame Grant Me Strength, which is a 20% buff to physical and fire damage for 30 seconds after casting. This doesn't affect our Holy Disc, but it does affect the weapon hit part of the Ash of War, and it also doesn't stack with Ironjar Aromatic, so only use this when you are specifically not using the Ironjar. As for its location, it is tucked in behind Fort Gale on the western side of Caelid. Then we actually have two more utility incantations. First up is Erdtree Heal, which is an absolutely massive heal incantation that we have in this build for two reasons. One, Ironjar makes you take a lot of damage that you would otherwise be able to avoid, so more healing around isn't a bad thing at all. And two, because of Ironjar, you can actually get this cast off while you're being attacked by enemies. On top of this, with the amount of faith that we have and a good scaling talisman like the Erdtree Seal that I'm using, the heal itself that you get for casting this is worth almost 2100 HP. Here you see me use it from 182 health and go all the way up to 2268. So yeah, that's pretty much a full heal right there. You get this simply by progressing through the story after Leyndell is turned to ash. Then finally we have the Blessing of the Erdtree, which heals you for about 1080 health over the course of 90 seconds after you cast it, which isn't a necessarily massive amount, but definitely doesn't hurt at all when you are tanking damage as hard as we are here. As far as acquiring this one, once again you'll just get it as part of the story, but this one you'll get far earlier, just a bit before you go to the mountaintop of the Giants region. With all that covered then, all the equipment talked over, let's take a moment to look at our attributes that you want to aim for when using this build. First up, 80 Faith. This weapon's skill scales with Faith, and so that is of course our main stat here. Then we want a comfortable amount of Vigor. I always recommend going up to 60. After that you want 48 Endurance to be able to use this build with medium roll, aside from when Ironjar is active of course, as that does force you to have heavy roll anyways. But this also gives you a good amount of stamina with which to spam the Ash of War for ages. You need to have 16 Dexterity to be able to wield the weapon, and then the rest you want to stick into Mind to fuel your FP bar and let you spam the Ash of War more. Though again, generally you will run out of stamina before you run out of FP, at least in my experience. And there you have it everyone, an extremely tanky build, built to just sort of stand there and send out rings of death either from range or right up close in an enemy's face, made better in recent patches, and it allows you to just sort of turn your brain off for the most part, only dodging the rare attack while you just sort of turn into a tower defense turret of holy magic. I hope you've enjoyed this build, and I hope you enjoy it if you go out and try and make it for yourself. Like if you like the video, subscribe and hit the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.